Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen. I'm an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa. I present these videos weekly for a couple different reasons. The first of which is to take my brain out of the mode of background work with the text over the course of the week, and then move into the mode of actually writing and preparing a sermon that I'll preach to my congregation for the weekend. That's the first reason I do these. The second reason is just to allow you, the viewer, to gain some different insight into the assigned gospel text for the week. This particular week, which is July 10th, 2016, the 8th Sunday after Pentecost, our gospel lesson comes from Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. This gospel lesson is kind of a combination of two different things. Not really different, but it's the story of Jesus' interaction with one of the experts of the law who asks, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" and leads to the notion of what is the greatest commandment, is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And then the expert in the law asks, well, who is my neighbor? And that leads to the parable of the Good Samaritan. The first part is present in some of the other Gospels, at least in a certain form, but the parable of the Good Samaritan is unique to Luke, but that is our gospel lesson for this week. Ironic, if you're a normal viewer, I probably seem a little less animated than normal this morning because I just don't even know what to say. In the past few days, there has been two more senseless killings of men of color, which is a tragedy. And I woke up this morning to news that 5 police officers were killed, several more wounded while doing their jobs in Dallas overnight. And I don't know what to say. I don't know how to respond. I'm shocked that once more, or several times this week, in the past few days, this news has broken again. More death, more killings, all of it senseless, all of it unnecessary. And I don't know what to say. In moments like this, being a pastor, being the person who is expected to have answers, is hard. And I'm not saying that because poor me. I'm saying that because there is no answer to this. There is no reason why. There is no justification for these needless deaths on either side of the coin. It has to stop. Then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this and you will live." Okay, so the lawyer, the expert in the law, not a lawyer like we think of in our current society, but one who is an expert. A professor might be a way to describe this. This guy who knows the law of Moses inside and out, including the 10 Commandments and all of the many, many laws that the Jewish culture had established, knows the law. And when we think about this encounter, and Jesus says, "Well, you know the law. What does it say? Well, you read." And he basically says that the greatest commandments are love God and love your neighbor, that the 10 Commandments can be broken down to that. And that's true. Our theology in the Lutheran Church agrees with that. One of those commandments is number 5, do not kill, do not murder. You shall not murder. And we do, and it's pissing me off. And there is no response. There's no way to make this okay. There's no way to explain it away. And I'm having a real hard time finding the gospel. Yea, though I walk through the darkest valley. Psalm 23. The valley's pretty darn dark right now. And every time we turn on the news, it seems like it's more of this. So what can we say? What can we do? Jesus says, do this and you'll live. Well, we can't. We don't. We mess it up. And when we try and do right, we still mess it up. And when we pick a side, we mess it up. And I think Jesus knew that. Do this and you'll live. We don't. And we die. Wanting to justify himself, lawyer, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him, bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. Oftentimes this parable is given a moral understanding that it's about what you have to go do. It's about how you have to go respond, and that's not wrong. 2 of the people who should have helped this guy didn't. They chose not to see him because they passed on by. And the one who didn't, the one who is the enemy, and if you're familiar with the history of Samaritans in Jewish culture, boy, they were at odds. And I've talked about that in past videos. And yet this is the one who shows mercy, who is a neighbor. The enemy is the neighbor because he has compassion. The Greek is he was moved to compassion, and it's in the passive voice. This happens 3 times in Luke's gospel. Here, in the parable of the prodigal son, when the father was moved to compassion for his son, moved to compassion for him who was lost, him who was dead, who was as good as dead, is come back to life. And the 3rd time is Jesus moved to compassion for a widow who has lost her only son. He is moved to compassion and brings her back. In all 3 of these instances, it's not self-generated. The Samaritan does not say to himself, I have to make this choice, but it is passive. He is brought to compassion because of what he sees. And what does he see? He sees someone in need. Is that what Jesus is telling us to do? To allow ourselves to be moved to compassion when something needs to be addressed, when a problem is there? To not just pass by, to not just ignore, which is something that we have done for far too long. This stuff keeps happening. We keep killing each other. And why? Because we're different? Because we're afraid? Why? I don't have an answer to that. I don't know what to do with this sermon. But boy, it seems applicable. I don't know who's to blame. I don't know who's right. I don't know who's wrong. I know that this affects us all. I have family, I have friends in law enforcement who I know are afraid. I have friends on the other side of the coin who are afraid. I know I don't even know what I know. All I know is that Jesus says, do this and you shall live. Well, we don't. So what's that mean for us? It means that we're all on an equal playing field. And God chooses, God is moved to compassion. And so through the work of Christ, we are all redeemed. None of us deserve it, and yet it's given to us all. Flawed though we are, because of his love for us. And he tells us, go and do likewise. What's that look like? Well, maybe that looks like we don't kill each other. And maybe that looks like when it happens, we don't just sit and say, oh darn. And we feel the outrage. This is a different brain dump than normal. I'm not really going into the text very much. I don't think I need to. I don't know what my sermon's going to look like. It might look a lot like this. We got to do better. We got to understand who's our neighbor. Everyone is our neighbor. Let us be moved to compassion for one another. And not to look and see hate, to not look and see different, not look and see fear. Let's stop giving into fear. God bless.